Okay, thank you everybody for sticking around. Would it be possible to shut the doors? Not that I don't want to not have more people here, but noise in the narthex does kind of leak in here, so that would be helpful. Maybe to begin, for those of us who went on the trip, should we all just stand and do the Queen Elizabeth wave, maybe? All right, there were 8 of us. We'll have a picture at some point in the slide. I think I can sum it up for everybody. Our trip was absolutely phenomenal. Such a gift. Some of us had to wait a couple of years to make it happen, and we were certainly glad that we could make it happen. The verse that guided us throughout our time together, and this was often a verse that we said together, and I'm going to invite us to say it together now, comes from Joshua 1, verse 9. Would you join with me? Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. These are words that God gives to his people as they are getting ready to transition from 48 years camping in the desert to take on the promised land. And it was fitting for us to say these words as we walked in the land. Before I dive into pictures, just a couple of things that I think will be helpful for us to note. One of the stressors in terms of things that we highlighted the most was the topography of the land. I'm probably going to use this one since I'm left-handed, and I've got my little clicker here. This is a map of Israel, and you can see that there are a bunch of different sections here, right? We've got the sea, and then this is a little bit harder to read, but these are the coastal plains. And then this middle section here, that's called the Shephelah. And then you've got the Judean mountains, and then you've got the Judean wilderness, and then you've got the Dead Sea. This width here would be like a drive from Battle Creek to South Haven. Okay? And we have 4 distinct geographical areas. I completely underestimated that. Even when we did orientation and our tour guide, Jeff Blamer, was like, this is really important. I'm like, whatever. And then we were there and I'm like, oh, this is important. Because the temperature, the climate, we're going from 1,500 feet above sea level to 300, 400 feet below sea level in parts. And it's so stark and so contrasting, right? Like, so we started in this area, and then we went south to the desert, and then we kind of came our way up along the Dead Sea and spent a few days here, which there's kind of a division right about here, where this is now Palestinian-occupied territory, or otherwise known as the West Bank. So there are a few times you'd have to cross through borders and everybody smile and show your passport kind of thing. And then we made our way up to the Sea of Galilee and spent a number of days in this region. We'll get to that. Capernaum. And this is, where Jesus spent 3 years primarily doing life and ministry. And then we came back down and then headed through the Jezreel Valley to Mount Carmel. And then we made our way down to Caesarea, and then eventually back to Bethlehem and Jerusalem, which is right around here. So keep that in mind, and I'm actually going to show this slide a few times as we go from different places. The other key thing that I underestimated, and it was really critical to our journey, is this road, the Via Maris, which is the trade route in in the ancient Near Eastern world, where it starts in Cairo and eventually goes up through Syria and Damascus, and then from there you have other means of trade to sort of the northern empires there. This was built, primarily by, it has always been there, but fortified by the Romans. And the other underestimation, and only because he gets such a little bit of airtime in the Gospels, was the impact and the imprint of Herod the Great. Herod the Great was a phenomenal builder, and we visited 3 different sort of castles that he erected, and we'll see pictures of all of those. And all of these were sort of vestiges to the empire that was known. And that was critical to our understanding of how God's people lived, because they were either, not in the world or of it. Some separated totally, and then you get the sort of the story of the zealots, who were functionally terrorists in their day to try to beat back on the empire, and there's a few stories that will connect with that. But particularly in this area here, so Tiberias is on the Sea of Galilee, and right around here, Capernaum, where Jesus ministered. This is like at the intersection of the world. And often Jesus was trying to prod, God's people to not just live for themselves, but for the other. And that comes up in significant ways in the Gospels, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the Via Maris, critical road to the identity of God's people. And then finally, since we're going to be seeing a lot of these, and you may note there's, like the city Tel Aviv, right? A tel is just a sort of mound or hill that's been built upon over several centuries. And what's interesting, there would be a city, and then it would go away, and then another tribe would come in, or another bunch of people, and they would just build on top of those walls. And then they would build on top. So you get this sort of layered effect. And archaeologists today are still discovering new things in all of these different tells that are like everywhere. One of the more profound ones we'll get to is actually one of the palaces that Herod built. And even for our guides who had not been there, it had been 4 years since they had been there, they had said, well, this is all brand new. And it was actually a significant discovery. And so that matters there. So let's go back here. Again, just to put us, we're kind of in this area here, the Shephelah. This is like a 12 to 15 mile wide region in Judea between the coastal plains and the mountains. In Bible times, this area here would be the land of the Philistines, right? And so the Judeans would be here, and as we know in 1st, 2nd Samuel, Kings and Chronicles, we got lots of battles and stuff going on between here. All right, this is like early morning the first day, and I just wanted to show you some of the chaos that would ensue for us to... Actually, it was the evening, sorry. This is when we arrived, long travel there. But our faithful chariot, which I got another picture here, I called our driver Jehu. He's accused in the Old Testament of driving the chariot wildly and crazy, but our driver was fantastic. It's amazing, this size of bus and the small road, and lots of prayers from the back seat where I sat. Oh, right off the gate, we're here in the Shephelah and kind of the hilly region. Beautiful morning. We started with devotions, Isaiah 58, verse 12. Become the restorer of broken walls. These are all terraced walls that would be farmed. And one of the things that was impressed upon me was just how much communal life was important. How you would take care of your neighbor, how you would help restore their wall if it was broken. And Isaiah longs for the day when we, God's people, will be the restorer of broken walls. It was kind of a cool way to start. Eventually, we made our way to Bet Shemesh. This is This would be the Via Maris, would be kind of through this way here. This is the land and the place where the ark was returned by the Philistines in 1 Samuel 6. This is the Sorek Valley. And here, you see some hills. In this next picture, we'll see more. This is where Samson lived. And he would actually come down here to the village. So it's kind of funny when in my mind, as a 12-year-old, I thought, well, he's going far away. No, he's just literally going down the mountain. But yeah, Delilah was here, and yeah, all of that story took place there. And we're on a tell where they have done some digging and discovering. We moved on to a higher tell. This is the tell called Azekah, which overlooks the Elah Valley. And this is the site of the David and Goliath encounter. And in fact, if I can get my pointer just right, there's a bridge right here, which goes over David's Brook. So again, here's more of that valley. This is just a little to the left of that. You've got kind of Jerusalem in the background here. David would tend sheep, and then there's the story. He walks 10 miles from this region down to here to bring food to his brothers who are mad at him coming, and David's mad at them for not doing anything for 40 days. Interesting, 40, because nobody's brave enough to fight Goliath. And so then, that encounter happens right down here. And here we are trying to find our 5 stones. This is the brook, by the way. Very lush, right? Actually super dry. I don't remember what the temperature was at this point, but it was hot. This is a wadi, and it's not rainy season, so again, super dry. Some of us took stones home. A little bit later on, we went to the cave of Adullam. If you want to open your Bible to Psalm 142, you'll see in the inscription there that this is a place where David hid from Saul. And he wrote that psalm. This is the view from another end, kind of an interesting tree growing out there. And then we moved on in this area to Marisha, and we're about 35 miles south of Jerusalem. This is what's called a columbarium. This is in here they would store doves, most likely for sacrifice. But also in this place we were introduced to a Gat Shemen, which is an ancient olive press. Gat Shemen is where we get the name Gethsemane. And it was kind of cool to see how they restored this. Olives would come in, and that would be like the first step, and then they would refine it even more on this mill here. And then we ended our day here in the Bell's Cave. I don't have any video, but we actually sang. And there was quite the crowd that gathered, and they were very glad that we sang. Yeah, go to Mary Jane's Facebook page. I think you have a few videos there. It was day one. Then we went south, right? We're in this, and we make our way south into the wilderness, the Negev area. And we started our morning in Tel Arad. This is the land of the patriarchs, right? This is where God called Avram, or near here. And we're actually at the site of an ancient temple that would be at around Hezekiah's time. So this is kind of 700 BC. And there are archaeologists and others, repairing and bringing things back to kind of an imagined vision of what it was. Most of these tells had deep cisterns where water would be stored. That's what we're descending into here. This is probably a little spotting. Sonia and I are standing in the Holy of Holies. This is in that temple. Here is the kind of the tell from the bottom looking up. This one overlooked a Canaanite city, which is in the background here, that archaeologists think was around 3000 BC. I thought living in New England, we'd walk the land of old things. This was phenomenal. Just walking, and then you can see the tell here up in the distance. And what contrast was there was some water that they're starting to bring down into this valley. Were these olive trees? I can't remember. Yeah. Okay. I guess it's kind of like California. Where there's water, we'll grow things. And then we hiked in the canyon of Avdat. And this is us on the canyon floor. And along the way, we met a new friend. As the deer pants for water, so my soul pants for you. That's actually what David is referring to. And this guy just sort of coolly and calmly watched us. And we let him have his shade. There's an oasis. So this is a nice pool in the midst of the canyon. What was also interesting at this time, the Israeli Air Force were running jet fighters. So it was loud, and the stone walls were shaken. It's pretty neat. Well, you're in a canyon, and you can either go back to the bus and drive up to the top, or you walk your way out, which several of us decided to do. Temperatures are pushing about 105 and 106 degrees Fahrenheit. And up, so we have to go here. All right? So there we go. There's some switchbacks on the way up. Sonia made it first, of course, and had the camera. And so here's the group that survived. Note how red my face is. They said you should walk 2 miles every day. I should have interpreted that. You mean walk 2 vertical miles every day. Then we carried on in the wilderness to the fortress of Avdat, which actually used to be in sort of the Edomite territory. Here was a Roman fortress, which kind of kept an eye on the spice roads, and because there was a big spice trade back in the day. And this was a neat place. In the middle here, we're in the Praetorium. And while we weren't able to do this in Jerusalem, it was a great place to sort of settle because most of the Romans would build architecture the same. So when Jesus met Pilate in the Praetorium, it would be a place like this. And so it was good to sort of experience that. And then we ended at the southernmost point of our journey at the Mitzpah Ramon, which is kind of what they call the Grand Canyon of the Negev. There's a little outlook spot and then picture. So this is the Negev south. I took a screenshot of my phone. This would be where we were, right? And so here's the Red Sea in comparison with Egypt over here. So it was a dry and barren land, and interesting to kind of watch and see that and experience it, as I'm glad I didn't do it for 40 years. That's for sure. All right, so back to the Negev. Now we're heading to east into the Judean wilderness, and we're going to make our way up here to the Dead Sea. Oh, this is one of the hotels that we stopped at, or that we stayed at for a couple of nights. This is in Avdat, so right before we're moving to east towards the Dead Sea. We started our morning with devotions looking into the wilderness. Here's the Dead Sea in the distance. There were some sheep in the distance that some of us saw that were being tended to, and we reflected on Psalm 23, green pastures. This is what green pastures look like. Here we see the outline of the Dead Sea. You can tell the different colors here. The salination point is, I think, 30-some%. The Jordan River flows down into the Dead Sea. It's exceptionally low because of low rainfall that has come over the last decade or so. The wadis fill up in the rainy season, and they all flow into the Dead Sea, and for years it kind of stabilized. But there's also, on at least the southern part that we saw as we were driving around, there's a lot of manufacturing, like skin products are the thing, and so they mine the salt to put into skincare products, which is a big deal, and certainly when you stop there, that's all they sell you. So, this is a wonderful picture of Grace with, oh, nice, thank you. And we are looking at Masada, which is in the distance here. This is us up on the top. One thing to note, you see a lot of these black kind of lines, and I don't remember the archaeologist's name. If someone in our group does, feel free to shout it out. But everything below this black line is what was found, and what they put above is what they restore. So they want to give you this impression of, like, not everything looks exactly like this as it was, but here's what we're building on top of. And it's really cool. That's kind of everywhere at all of these sites that we went to, which was helpful to kind of frame things. Hey, Todd. So we're overlooking the Dead Sea here. In the distance would be Moab and the Moabite mountains. You can see some of the original walls. Masada was one of the palaces that Herod built. And we were all like, why? Why do you need a palace here in front of a Dead Sea? Well, again, a lot of it was just to keep an eye on the tribes and the peoples from here. And there is a route, up and down to the Red Sea, so they needed to have some outpost. Here's a model of what it looked like in its heyday. A lot of times we'd stop, and this is Jeff Blamer, our guide, and then our guide on the street there, Khalil. I have a few more pictures. Beautiful person and dear friend of many of us now who helped navigate a lot of the behind the scenes for us, and we are so grateful for his work. What's interesting is that right on top, there is an Orthodox Jew, and he's actually transcribing scriptures. What I wanted to know is, why is Gumby there? And then these are, I think, $50 bills. U.S. Like, interesting. But we're looking to the west side of Masada on the back end. So in the intertestamental time, particularly if we would read the book of the Maccabees, their story and the story of their revolt takes place here. After the fall of Jerusalem, there was like 900 zealots that took over Masada, and then for 2 years they were sort of stuck up there as the Romans were figuring a way out, how do we get rid of these folks, and a big battle ensued, and that's why it still exists today. All right, so we moved north just a little bit, and these are the caves of Qumran. And this is a community of Essenes, which were a sect in Judaism that were kind of monastic. They wanted to separate themselves from the world, and so they built this community along the Dead Sea. And one of their key practices was ritualistic bathing, which is called a mikvah in Israel. Are you fighting with me? I don't know, because I'm not able to. There we go. No worries. Are you playing solitaire? Okay. All right, here's another mikvah pool, or a cistern where they kept water. And there's a distinction in the Hebrew mindset between two kinds of water, still water and living water. And so we'll talk about that in a minute, but this would be kind of a cistern where the still water would stay. And that was important in their ritualistic cleaning to have living water. And so they would have to bring water that was flowing down and kind of mix it with the still water to sort of legitimize its sort of, specialness. It's at this site in 1948 where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Apparently a young shepherd boy threw a stone and it created that big sort of chasm right here. And inside this cave is where they found all the Dead Sea Scrolls. Terry, are you here? Yeah. So your brother, right? Right. Yeah, I was talking to your mom. She's right over there. Yeah. Well, what's interesting is actually Terry's brother and Sonia's dad were going to do an archaeology dig in 1970. Was that what your mom said? 71. Except there was a little war going on, and was it in Lebanon? Or Jordan. And so they were not able to go do this. Instead, they partied in Europe for 3 months, but that's another story. And they got seminary credit for it. Believe it or not. Again, that's another story. I digress. So this is just, if we go from here, we're turning around, and this is what we see. So the Dead Sea, and this is Moab. Who came from Moab? Right. I always thought it was way out there. Nope, it's across on the other side of the Dead Sea. Interesting. And then we made our way around, so if you can picture the Dead Sea, we're kind of on the northern part, and this is where the Jordan River sort of flows into the sea itself. Thought this was interesting. This land was actually given back by Jordan. At one point, it was kind of like the no man's land between Israel and Jordan, and there were bunkers, and it was chaotic, and they had hundreds of mines, which they've now cleaned up. And so Israel has this back as part of or is it Palestine, excuse me? Yeah, it's Palestine, not Israel. Anyway, Sonia is doing a mikvah in the very clean Jordan River. But this is likely the spot where John the Baptist baptized Jesus. Just north of the Dead Sea. And where the Israelites entered the land. Thank you. I decided to go all in. And these gentlemen on the other side, you can't see their AK-47s, weren't too happy. Or at least they were suspicious of my activity. Because believe it or not, the current here is strong. And it took me, and so this here is the border. Here's Jordan, literally Jordan. And here's the other side. So we had to be very careful. That's why they were watching us. All right, again, we're in the Dead Sea. This is our fourth day. This is actually the day when Yom Kippur would start. Yom Kippur is the highest of holy days in the Orthodox Jewish calendar. It's the Day of Atonement, and it's a day when you shut absolutely everything down. So the itinerary had to be moved around to accommodate for that. The plan was to spend more time in another park, and this is En-Gedi. Here's another one of those deers panting for streams of water. It's in En-Gedi where we see a lot of different caves. And when David and Saul were chasing each other, these would be the caves that they'd hide out. And in fact, this was the spot where David chased Saul. I think it's 1 Samuel 24. Tells the story of how Saul had to basically go to the bathroom. And so he took care of business in one of these caves, and then David sneaks up and cuts off a corner of his robe and lets him go. And it's a pivotal moment in kind of the power dynamic. They did not have a plaque that said Saul went to the bathroom here, but it was neat to imagine that. But we were also thinking, why would you have to climb a cave to go to the bathroom? But anyway, that's another time of wonderment, I guess. And Gedi is also an oasis, and you can see water that is coming down here. That would be from a wadi river that flows down. And, I talked a little bit a minute ago about the two distinctions of water, and then this here would be classified as living water. Living water is water that comes from above, water that God gives, water that comes from the heavens. And so it was pretty significant. The lushness of this oasis in the midst of this desert space was truly magnificent. And several of us got baptized by the living water. Amen. All right. Glory. Yeah, it was a pretty special time. Now, the plan then was to actually kind of walk up throughout the park, but again, because of Yom Kippur, we had to shorten our time. They actually closed the park 2 hours earlier than what they normally would do, like on a Shabbat, where they would close down at 4. They closed the park at 2, so we could only play for so long. But we did climb up a little bit, and I love this picture with the hot sun, and here's the Dead Sea. And if you would keep ascending, you could follow the springs, and you'll see, obviously where there's lush vegetation, there's water. So we decided to hang out in the Dead Sea. We were there for a little bit. All right, and then that turned us now, so we're kind of in this area here, right, where the River Jordan meets. And we spent time in Jericho, which is a city that has been dated to 9,000 BC. It's considered the oldest city in the world. And it's a city of many significant events, right, in the biblical story. It's just 17 miles east of Jerusalem, so just over the wilderness and into the mountains. Most likely when Jesus was, after his baptism here, he was led out into the wilderness. And so probably in this area for 40 days. It's the city where God's people coming out here were told to conquer, where they met Rahab. We did see a tell where they believe the original walls were, or some of the original walls. Kind of hard to say original when your city's 9,000 years old, or more for that matter. But we did get up early and had occasion to walk the Jericho Road. And as I said, it's about 17-mile journey from Jericho to Jerusalem, and we're on the side where the bus dropped us off, and then we eventually went down here. This is the road, right here. And I use that word road loosely. It's a beautiful hike. I think we did about 3 miles. 5? Okay. And again, this is the road, right? So when Jesus tells the story in Luke 15 of the Good Samaritan, right, this is the road that would evoke in everyone's imaginations. We were led by a Bedouin guide and his 2 sons. About halfway, he stopped and put on a pot of coffee, more like oil. It was known to be a dangerous road. One of the things that was called to our, collective Bible story memory was, Jesus is, as a 12-year-old, is consecrated at the temple, right? Like in terms of doing his own probably bar mitzvah. But Mary and Joseph, kind of head back, and the text says it's about a day's walk. Well, they forget that Jesus is still back in Jerusalem. And so it was kind of fun to reimagine. What would it be like to be here and then have to turn around and go all the way back to Jerusalem to go get Jesus? I thought you had him. I thought you had him. Right? So this would be that journey. Here's the city of Jericho in the distance. Here's our entire group along the way. We're sitting on the side of the road for, I think this was the parable of the Good Samaritan. We reflected on that text. I don't know. Oh, and Nutella is supposed to go on a crepe. This actually says creep, so we thought that was kind of funny. This is just driving in Jericho, and you see a bus stop with the Nutella advertisement. This is a sycamore tree. Most likely not the tree that Jesus called Zacchaeus from, but that's another story that happens in the city. We did go to the Tel Es-Sultan, which is the sort of the original walls that they've been digging up in the old Jerusalem. And then after lunch, in Jericho, When in Jericho, you have to ride a camel. So, come on. Can you advance for me? Thank you. Again, that's our guide, Khalil. I really like his hat. I'll just leave it at that. Next slide. There's all our fearless camel riders. Next one. Yeah, and this is Elisha's spring. Jericho is where Elijah passes the mantle on to Elisha. Again, it was a super hot day for us. And we had to wait until sundown before we get on the bus because we were going to go through a checkpoint because now we're going to drive north. I think I have so we're here and we're just going to follow the Jordan Valley up to the Sea of Galilee, and right around here is the checkpoint. So we had to wait until a certain time. Or else if we were driving in Israel while it was still Yom Kippur, they would likely throw stones at the bus. So it was interesting to have to sort of pivot to the religious and cultural expectations of the land. Here is the western side of the Sea of Galilee. This is the Capernaum region. Right below here is Magdala. This picture was taken on the top of Mount Arbel, which was known as the Mountain of the Rabbis. And sometimes the text says Jesus went up the mountain to pray. Well, this is like the only mountain in the region, and even though it's not mentioned specifically in the Gospels, it seems to make sense that this would be a mountain that Jesus would climb up to. The beautiful vista of really the entire Sea of Galilee, but particularly the northern part. Thankfully, we took the bus up, and then we hiked down. And I used the term hike loosely because at points we had to hang on. This is the cliff face, and there are cables and handles in the mountain to help us navigate. But you guys make it look easy here. It was somewhat perilous, but we were all glad at the end to say, yeah, we did that. Now, thankfully, we didn't have to go all the way down the mountain like that, about maybe a third, and then the other 2/3 was switchbacks all the way down. This is the sanctuary of a Catholic church in Magdala that was built to honor the Talmidot, the women disciples of Jesus. And so we took a picture of our Talmidots. Beautiful, beautiful church. Had this beautiful picture of the story of the unclean woman touching Jesus' robe. Very powerful image. And then we went to several, synagogues, and I think this is the one in Chorazin, which is a near city to Capernaum. The Gospels tell us that Jesus went into every synagogue to preach. So it was kind of, awesome and overwhelming to know that Jesus, and this is inside the synagogue, they're doing some restoration work, and we got a nice explanation of synagogue sort of rituals and how everything works there. But to think, wow, Jesus probably taught in this one. And then, Luke tells the story in Luke 4 about how Jesus got up to the synagogue to teach. And by the way, there are no pastors in a synagogue. Everybody reads the Bible in the community of faith, and then you have to give like a 3-minute sermon. And I thought, hold on, we should explore that a little bit more, which is really cool. And the docent of the synagogue, would kind of assign the schedule, so you knew in advance. And so it seems that for Jesus' family, he knew when it was time to go to his synagogue to go teach. And what text does he use but the prophetic words of Isaiah? And then he, has a big flex where he says, you're seeing that in action today. But anyway, it was really powerful to sort of be in there. And then we ended our day. This is on the northern part where Jesus most likely gave the Sermon on the Mount. And our guide, Jeff, recited Matthew 5 through 7 from memory for us there. And it was pretty special to just take that all in. We continued in Galilee. Mary Jane, I think this is your photo. You guys got up early, or a few of you did, and watched the sunrise. Beautiful, beautiful sunrise. We headed over to Capernaum, where Jesus adopted that as his hometown. And he called his disciples and taught them as a rabbi would. And so we sat around this tree right on the water and soaked it all in as we engaged God's Word and were taught from it. So this is Mount Arbel here in the distance. And here's the faithful from Third. Wonderful group shot there. Then we made our way kind of northeast, and this is another Roman outpost, which was taken over by zealots. This is called Gamla, and it's kind of nicknamed the Masada of the North. And this was a zealot stronghold for many years, and they fought off the Romans from here. It's also place known for eagles, and wouldn't you know it, guess what flew by? There were a few of them, which is really cool. So here we're seeing, this is the north part of the Sea of Galilee. And if I go back, I think Sonia is looking kind of south, but if we were to look to the, this would be to the eastern side over there, all right? And that's significant because this place here was known as the far-off land. Right? So when Jesus tells the story in Luke 15 that there was a son that demanded his inheritance, he said to his father, "Give it to me and I'm going to take it." You know where he spends it? Right here. And the father is right here. Far off doesn't mean geographical. Far off means spiritual. And so that takes that story about how the father waits at the end of his driveway looking for his son. He can see the land where his son is at. And Jesus uses that euphemism of the other side, right? All of the Jewish life is here. This would be, the other nations, the other side. And Jesus was constantly saying, we need to look here. We need to go here. And again, the Via Maris is running right around here. Right? So this is where the world is doing life and trade and influencing culture. And so it's just kind of powerful to see all of those things at play in that space. This would be at Kersey, which is which is on the other side. The gospel stories of Legion, the demoniac, and the pigs that went into the water would be from this area. And then we spend some time on the Sea of Galilee itself. Before you embark on one of the boats, we actually had opportunity to walk through a museum where archaeologists uncovered, it was in the 80s, the remains of a fishing boat, and they date this to the time of Jesus, which is remarkable because that gives us some insight on what a fishing boat at Jesus' time would look like. And so we boarded one, probably a little bit bigger, and had a chance to cast our nets. But then what does Jesus say? Go to the other side. And he doesn't mean like all the fish are there. It's a missional call. Go to the other side, right, to the land of Moab, up the Via Maris, where we need to share God's love with the world. It was a beautiful late afternoon cruise, beautiful way to see the city. Some of you asked, well, what were your accommodations like? No, this wasn't fish for breakfast, but this was at the kibbutz place that we stayed, and their food there was pretty phenomenal. I haven't eaten so much dessert in my life. I'll have to do lots of 2-mile vertical hikes to walk it off. All right, moving to day 8. Now we are eventually going to go through the Jezreel Valley and then head over west, crossing those distinct geographical places again, right? So we've been here. We're actually going to go back down and then over. And we head back down in particular because we spent the morning at Bet Shean, which is a Hellenistic city built by Alexander the Great. But this is also the place where the Philistines capture Saul and his sons, and after they kill them, they hang them on the city walls. That was kind of just in behind here. So it was a little sobering to remember that story, but this was a kind of an epicenter of Greek and then Roman culture, and we're actually in a spa that they constructed. Everything was about self and man. And this is the remnants of a bathroom. And then along the way, on the road, as they were building this new highway, they had to stop for a moment because there was a first century tomb. Now, this is not the tomb where Jesus lay, but it's a tomb like the one that Jesus would have laid at. And it's literally right off the highway. So we stopped, and a few of us got in. And then we made our way up to Mount Carmel, and this is at the top of the mountain, where we reflected on 1 Kings 18 and 19, the story of Elijah and his sort of showdown with the prophets of Baal and Ashtoreth. Kind of ironic that this is there. No fire. And this is a picture on top of a church that's been built there that overlooks the Jezreel Valley. And it also hopefully gives us a sense of how high Mount Carmel is. And so when there's that showdown about pouring more water and more water and more water, where are you going to get the water? Well, the water's down here. I mean, those poor prophets, they had a lot of work to do to get water and to wet that wood. It also shows you how far Elijah ran after that whole escapade and hid off somewhere else. Then we made our way to the coast. These are the remains of an aqueduct built by Herod in Caesarea. Eventually, we went to the site of one of his palaces there. This would have been the homestead of Pilate, because this was the place where those that governed the Judeans lived. It was also the place at the end of Acts, chapter 23 through 26, where Paul spent 2 years in prison. And I think after walking around the grounds here and imagining what it would have looked like, it had a big built, theater, game, sport. This was actually a pool that Herod had, and this sort of jettisons out into the sea. I think Paul had it pretty good being in prison for 2 years. It's also a port city, so Paul left here a couple of times for some missionary journeys. And again, it's, as I said, Pilate resided there. So then we started to make our way into the interior again, back to the Shephelah, back to the Judean mountainside. This is a picture of Bethlehem at night, the hotel we stayed at there. And of course, we are in Palestine, and we had to cross the walls to get into Palestine. And it's an occupied territory. It's also the home of another palace of Herod. This one is called the Herodium, and this is a tell, right? So this was a palace that was built up. And after, zealots and Judaizers, took it over, they just dumped dirt and stones, and they just built a hill over it. And so part of the archaeological work today is uncovering all of that. In its heyday, right, this was the highest point in the area, and Herod wanted to be buried here, which he was. And so on the top, we are now looking towards the Dead Sea. And one of the cool things we were asked to imagine is this would be like Bethlehem. And, the place where Jesus was born, which is most likely in a cave, not in a barn. And what's most interesting is that it's within eyesight of the tallest place in the area, the place that represented power, right? When the wise men want to go pay homage, right, they get directed to the little village just near here. They don't come to, the place that would scream, obviously, this is where you come to the place of power. So such a stark contrast to take note of that. Now, one of the things that they've uncovered in the last 4 years is that there was a giant staircase on the front side of this hill, and that wasn't there 4 years ago. So that tells you how recent and busy archaeology work is in Israel and Palestine today. And here's a shot from the bottom of it. Well, it's actually not even the bottom. It's probably about halfway up. It's pretty majestic. After that, we visited a shepherd's cave, one that would be a similar place for the birth of Christ. We also sang some Christmas carols in there, and that was kind of cool. Had lunch at a Bedouin restaurant tent, and then visited the Church of the Nativity, which in the sort of crusade times, Constantine's mother, right? Was that the deal? Say her name? The 4th century, yeah. So this time of Constantine, who adopted Christianity as the religion of the Roman Empire, they went back to the Holy Land, and they tried to, figure out the exact locations of key events in the life of Jesus. And so then what did they do? This is his mother, had churches built on what the alleged sites were. Now, modern scholarship and archaeology sort of debunks a lot of this, but, for, centuries now, followers of Jesus would make pilgrimage to these places. And what's interesting is that this is a church and it's kind of split in the middle, because on this side is the Catholics and on this side are the Armenians. And then this is where they do Mass, and they have to share that space. And so one of the pilgrimages is to go below and to see the alleged site, the place where Jesus was born. Not all of us are thrilled with going down into tight spaces, but this is what you see. And, I think that was another interesting gleaning, at least for me, where, the church is diverse, and we all have different ways to find meaning in our faith. And, it's kind of like what we were talking about this week and last week. Can we make space for those in the church at large for how they engage this kind of stuff? I mean, in other areas, people would fawn over this space. And for some of us, we were like, that makes no sense. But it was meaningful for them. Anyway, some more pictures from down there. In fact, there was a group that they started singing, right? There was a whole group, and some Eastern European language. But then actually an officer had to come down and say, be quiet. We're having Mass. Right above. So we were going to make our way back into Jerusalem, but we spent our morning learning a little bit more about the sort of layers of complexity between the Palestinian and the Israeli relationship. And as we know, that's been going on for millennia. But one of the key places that tells that story is the Waldorf Hotel, which has artwork like this that sort of tells the painful story. But we also were exposed to some neat things happening in Bethlehem among Palestinian Christians. This is our group at a place called the Al-Basma, which means the smile. It's an organization that works with developmentally disabled adults who are very forgotten and left in that culture. And they're just bringing a little kingdom through doing a wonderful ministry there. And so it was neat to just spend some time seeing a win, a success for the church in Palestine. And Todd and I are literally sitting against the wall, like on the other side would be Israel. And then we spent some time at Bethlehem Bible College, and we had an occasion to hear from one of their professors, again, who just sort of explained life as a Christian in that region and told, stories of lament, but also stories of praise of how the church is slowly making a difference there in Palestine. And it was an honor to be part of those stories. So we eventually crossed in and made it to the Israel Museum, which has a 50-to-1 scale of the Old City. This would be the section, the City of David. This would be Herod's Temple, or what's often referred to as Second Temple. And it was kind of helpful to... It's in Jerusalem, yes, excuse me, right. It's also the place where they have an incredible Dead Sea Scroll exhibit, which is a really awesome thing to witness and experience. This is from our hotel in Jerusalem, and we're looking up to the old city here. I put this in just to give us a little bit of direction. Again, if we go back to this model, we're kind of similar, right? So here's kind of the Legoland version of it. And here, again, you can see Herod's Temple, the City of David, the Kidron Valley that lies to the east side, and the Mount of Olives, which we're going to see a picture from in just a moment. And today, this is like quartered off between the Muslims, Christians, Jews, and the Orthodox Armenians. And it was interesting to wander the streets in most of these places. We stayed out of no, we were in all of them, I think. What was also interesting is that we were in Jerusalem during a very key festival, Sukkot, which is the Festival of Tabernacles or Booths. And all of Orthodox, all the Orthodox Jews were in Jerusalem doing a pilgrimage, as is custom, as was Levitical command. So there was an extra busyness in the city, which made driving around and parking and meeting up with our bus driver a little bit challenging, but and also it was just crazy busy. But when Jesus tells about the time of Pentecost and the busyness of Jerusalem as they were making preparations for that, I think that had extra meaning for us. These are original walls from the city of David that are being uncovered, and we're about to enter into Hezekiah's tunnel. And so this is the Kidron Valley, and there's the Gihon Spring, just by reference. Mount of Olives back here. This was a tunnel that Hezekiah had built to sort of protect waters from the Gihon Spring, and it was redirected to the pool of Siloam where Jesus healed a blind man. And it's about 600 and some yards, and it's a little tight. But you can see at my feet there's running water, and it was cool. For those of us that were a little nervous, we just started singing hymns. And that was a real special time of worship, where just by the light on our head and just feeling our way through, singing hymns to just calm our spirits, which was cool. All right, we're on the Mount of Olives, and we're looking over the Kidron Valley into the city of Jerusalem. There was a burial site there, which would give us a sense of what burial practices were at that time. In fact, there's a huge seminary, Freudian slip, cemetery on that side of the mountain, which faces east, because everyone believes in the day of the Lord, Messiah will come from the east and the dead will rise. And it's kind of spectacular to see all of that. Well, in the Mount of Olives is the Garden of Gethsemane. So we walked over to that garden, and we were asked to read the story of the Garden of Gethsemane on our own, which was pretty special. And just a picture of kind of the busyness of traditional Orthodox Jews here waiting for the bus. We're walking in through, I believe this is the Jaffa Gate, and just walking the streets of Jerusalem. This is here in the Jewish quarter. When in Jerusalem, you got to get your falafel. This would be one of the booths, the sukkah, that we would see everywhere, right? Families would build a special tent because this celebration remembers that God came and tabernacled with his people. It's also akin to our Thanksgiving time. It'd be the time of harvest, a time of joy, a time to celebrate God's gifts to us. And it was very, joyful. A lot of excitement in the city at the time. And I found this to be a rather stark contrast. These are Orthodox coming out of a synagogue, and that's to the left. And if I turn to the right, we have Israeli guards just working. I don't know. But they were everywhere, armed. And so it was this stark contrast of just sort of who's in power and who wants to be. And this is the last remaining part of the wall that Herod built in the Second Temple, the Western Wall, as it's known. So we got a chance to, that's a picture of my hand, touching it. Men are on one side and women are on the other. So here's several of our group. Ron doing his best Indiana Jones impression. We had to have our head covered. It didn't matter, so nice hat. Hey, Todd. He didn't know I was behind him, so he turned around, and then I snapped that picture. That was kind of funny. And then again, recent archaeological work. Israel has another national park where they take you underground into the old city, particularly along the walls of the temple that Herod built. And it's quite magnificent. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but what was it, 14 meters long? And, single stone, right? Yeah. The engineering feat. We'll see a picture in a moment of how several of us thought we could wingspan just one stone, and it took 5 of us to do it. Again, we're in Sukkot. We visited a garden tomb, which would be like the tomb that Jesus would have, his body would have been put into. This is not that tomb, although some group think that it is because they think that they're right next to Golgotha, and they're probably not. But this is where it gets interesting. So a lot of times we'd visit places and have to imagine or reimagine events. It was also a wonderful place where we could worship together and celebrate communion. And I think what was exceptionally beautiful is that there are 4 or 5 other groups in all different languages doing the same thing. And what a great picture, of the day to come when all will be one. And that was rich, super rich. This is near excavation outside of St. Anne's. And the only reason why I think I snapped this picture is because this is a manger, right? Which is actually to hold water, not hay. Jesus says, I'm the water of life, right? The living water. That's interesting. That's inside the church, St. Anne's. This is the church that has phenomenal acoustics. Again, you'll have to go to our Facebook page to hear. We sang 3 songs, and that was really awesome. I think this is a picture in front of Pilate's church. Everybody's got a church there. Again, in the streets, we're actually following a group of Catholics, and I believe they were Spanish. Someone's holding a cross here, and they're doing the Via Dolorosa, the traditional route that Jesus walked to Golgotha. Some of us were a little out of sorts then. So this is us right behind. And then, of course, there's another church. This is the Church of the Sepulchre, which is the alleged site of the traditional site of the crucifixion. Again, that's been debated. It's probably not. But this church was packed, and many Christians from around the world making pilgrimage to this site, where there actually has a burial site, a cemetery, and which would be more likely where Christ's body would have laid. And then we're nearing the end here. We're on the wall again. See what I mean by how big one of these, they called them Herod stones or Herod bricks. It took 5 of us and our collective wingspan to span one stone. And now we're on the temple steps near the People's Gate. And this was a neat time for us to actually end really the teaching part of our tour. Sonia's right here, and these 3 gates were known as the People's Gate. And one of the things we reimagined was how the Spirit of God would have come out of those gates to come along on the followers of Jesus and send them out into the world. And here we are as the group that was getting ready to be sent out. So a lot of you have been asking, well, what was this like for you? And I came across this quote from St. Jerome, who said this: 5 Gospels record the life of Jesus. 4 you'll find in books, and the one you will find in the land they call holy. Read the 5th Gospel, and the world of the 4 will open to you. And again, as I started out, just walking the space, experiencing color, texture, flavor, spaces, geography. It's amazing how hilly the entire area is. For me, it was kind of like a 2-dimensional reading and understanding suddenly became 3-dimensional. And a lot of the gospel stories will just be read in a new way, which I think is a gift. And also just missing out on a lot of cultural references. It was good to be there to kind of get things now. As it sort of helped aid a greater depth and understanding to the gospel and to the context of the birth of Christianity. And then also just highlighted the fact that the gospel is always on the move. We did a lot, we uncovered a lot, we saw a lot in a short time. But I don't think it was any different, whether it was God's people roaming around, whether it was Jesus calling the disciples, whether it was the church being sent out to go. We're called to be on the move, and that's a difficult thing for us because we're in a day and culture where stability and feeling settled is so cherished. And to have that rub a little bit, it's certainly a challenge. And just how life together is so important. We live in a very individualistic culture, and it's counter-cultural to think of community. And just, I think, among our group, the 25 of us over the 2 weeks, what a gift it was to just be together in spaces together and to rely on each other. There were times where we're helping each other navigate the land, or we're offering an extra bottle of water or whatever. I mean, that just, accented that a whole lot. And, I'll speak for myself, but I think I can speak for everyone in our group. Just how we engage Scripture, that has now changed. And certainly will change for me for the life to come. So thank you for the chance to share. Sorry I went a little bit over. There were 200 and some pictures. So, but I'm grateful for the gift of the time to be able to go, gift of the encouragement to go. Some of you helped contribute to make that a reality, and certainly grateful for that as well. Indeed, it was a life-changing experience. So with that note, I'll end. If anybody has any questions, feel free to fire away. But well, thank you. All right. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your week. Thank you, tech support.